Hey Frank, we're live. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey Noah, how are you? Hi everyone. Welcome to Everyman BJJ episode 33. 34 weeks in the calendar year. We've got episode 33, so we got to squeeze one more in so that we're current 1 week. I'm here with my friend Noah Green, New York, Manhattan's finest, who's not in Manhattan right now. But Noah, by coincidence, we both kind of went with the red today. We went with
Um,
the.
yeah.
It's rare.
So,
It's rare that we do that, but
well, this is one of those weird shirts they had like location unknown, Island. It took me
uh,
forever to get. I messaged customer service about 6 weeks after I'd ordered it and never got a response. And then just one day it showed up in the mail. So I
yeah,
was quite
I've
quite
had those. I've
disappointing.
had those things happen. I ordered a book. Dr. Caldwell Estelson has a great book. It's called How to Reverse Heart Disease, and him and Dr. Dean Ornish had done. They've been doing a lot of studies with plant-based nutrition, and in the case of Dr. Dean Ornish, who was the former attorney, he was the former doctor for like Newt Gingrich when he was the head of the I believe it was the House. And then he was also the doctors for Bill Clinton, for former President Bill Clinton. And both of those guys, plant-based nutrition. Ornish does a lot of meditation and weaves that stuff into it for like a holistic. But anyway, I ordered that book. And of course, if you order it accelerated, right? If you order it, hey, you want it in 3-4 days, it's like, whatever. It's like, it was something ridiculous. The book was like $8, and then the ship it was going to be 20 if I wanted it really quick. And then the other option was like $9. And then it told me the book was going to come August 21st was the estimate. And, for like $9. And then I'm like, okay, I'll just do it. I won't pay for shipping. Right. And they shipped and they're like, August 21st is going to be when it will be there. And it got there like in literally like 4 days. So go figure, like, not paying. It's that rare time where it actually works in your favor.
Yeah.
And I think, Noah, you know this better than I do. I think that they give that estimate almost for customer expectation so that it's usually a lot longer. That estimate's usually a lot longer than it's probably going to arrive, right? So that
This is through Amazon?
this was through Amazon, yeah.
Yeah, Amazon, what they want to do is they're a big part of what they're trying to do is to exceed your expectations, and that expectation they're going right after. That's why they build these massive warehouses, very in cities, so that they're cutting the shipping time. A lot of what they're doing is to cut that shipping time, but then also anticipate what you want more so. But I wanted to go back a little bit, just back a step a little bit, and this about the T-shirt. And I was having a little bit of some ruminations about the shirt, and I think, well, I bought it through the UFC store, and I know that Dana White. Excuse me, real quick. I'll let the kitty cat wants to go out of here. Um, I know that Dana White said before, he's like, having a T-shirt business is a dumb thing. He doesn't care for it. However,
He said that to me verbatim, face to face.
I would say this: as you do one thing, you do all things, and at least if you're gonna hold yourself out and you're gonna sell those T-shirts, do that just as good as you put on your productions. As you do one thing, you do all things. And um, there's a topic that I kind of am into, which is it's very annoying. Things that annoy you. And to me, if you're going to be in business and you're going to provide that service, then I want you to, like UFC. Hey, they put on fights. And I understand they do it really well. Um, it's kind of like, I went flying. When you fly, you're in flights. I had a flight attendant tell me once, we're a transportation company. We're not a restaurant. So don't expect good food on a plane. And I thought about that, and I'm like, on one hand, I'm not going to per se, I'm not going to Le Bernardin for transportation, and these fine Michelin guide 5-star restaurants. I don't expect that experience on an airplane. I don't, because that's a transportation company. But as you do one thing, you do all things. And transportation, yeah, we got there. I got to that destination. All right. But I do think that if they're going to be in the business and they're going to offer something, then you should do your best as well as, if you're going to offer that, do that as the best you can. It's like, that's an annoying thing to me. You and I have a topic today to talk about, jiu-jitsu topic today. But, I do think, that old saying, as you do one thing, you do all things. Well, and for the UFC, if you're going to sell T-shirts, like, at least respond to repeated email messages to customer service saying, "Where's my product? Where's my product?" It says, "You took my money. You took my money 6 weeks ago." And to do that, it doesn't take much to set up an automatic. There's software out there today for chat boxes, that where you have artificial intelligence that will look up your order number and provide you that information. If you email in a question, you can have a ticketing system. It's a ticketing system. It creates when you email an email address, it'll create a ticket, and you can have artificial intelligence. And this is like off-the-shelf technology from Google, okay? And it will read the sentiment and extract information out of that email, and it will route it to the right person for a response and give you a canned response of like, "Hey, we received it. We'll give you a response in 48 hours." Something like that. That just kind of peeves me a little bit, that in a day where if they're going to sell T-shirts, either sell it and at least have some basic customer service, or get out of that business. Don't sell me this shirt and it come after all the fights are already gone. Like, they're not going back to Yaz Island. They declared Yaz Island, had all the fights, and then here I am with this T-shirt on. Okay? It's just messed up.
Yeah, I kind of like the appeal of Fight Island as much as, I lived in Las Vegas for 17 years. I like the appeal of Fight Island. I think it's a good name. It's a good theme. If you're not going to have a crowd, right? Obviously, you and I talked about this yesterday. We were talking about Joe Rogan moving to Texas.
Yeah.
And some of the advantages of that. And we were talking about Joe Rogan in the booth at UFC. Of course, he's narrowed it down. Basically, it seems like Joe can pretty much be in the booth, the UFC booth, whenever he wants, whenever he feels like it, which is very smart. He's in a rarefied air now with his wealth, with his influence, with his brand. And it's interesting because, I think some of the allure for Joe Rogan, who's been doing this forever. He was doing it. Joe Rogan, this is something a lot of people don't know, that Joe Rogan in the beginning was doing UFCs for free. He wasn't making any money. They didn't have money to pay him. They were so in debt. They were so in the hole that Joe did it for free. And that always carried a lot of weight with Dana White and with Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta. The fact that he was out there in front, he loved it that much. So he's pretty much, as my brother would say, we would say in Baltimore, street certified, right? He's street certified, right? He's grandfathered in. But it's definitely different calling a fight when there's 16,000, 17,000 people in the arena and when there's 200 people. And as what we saw a few weeks ago with Dan Hardy, who I've trained with, Dan Hardy and Herb Dean, where the referee can hear what the commentator is saying, and the commentator can actually kind of yell something, stop the fight, to the ref, and and everything. It's this big echo chamber where everybody can hear everything. And there's something, that is not to say, Noah, there is something to be said for fights where where it's that intimate and there's only 100 people in there. If you are live in there, it has its own advantages because you can sort of hear the fighters breathing. You can hear every kick, every thump, kicks that seem innocuous and don't seem like a big deal when there's 16,000 people in there because you can't hear that kick, or you can't hear that a kick got checked. Well, you can hear it. So it's much more visceral and much more primal experience when you're there. And it's small and you feel, you have the advantage of feeling like you're exclusive. You're allowed to be there. You're one of the few there. But as a commentator and even as a fan, I was telling you about Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen 1, which was in Northern California. And Chael Sonnen was a huge underdog going into that fight and talked a lot of smack. And everybody was fairly certain that Anderson Silva was going to shut him up and make him pay. And then round by round by round, Chael Sonnen is taking Anderson Silva down and holding him down. And then it became this suspense of simultaneously watching the clock. And you could feel, so the crowd wasn't in a frenzy in that fight. It was actually the opposite. That was what was unique about it. There's like 14, 15,000 people in that arena watching Chael and Anderson, watching what's going on, disbelief. And it was so hush quiet that it was so remarkable. It was like, because even though it was quiet in there, right? And there was this collective disbelief, and there was this, and as round by round, it was like, is Chael Sonnen going to be able to do this? Are we really watching this? Is this real? And you could collectively feel that. And that's pretty amazing when you can get that, or the opposite. Like when I was there when Roy Jones got knocked out by Antonio Tarver back when Roy Jones was considered invincible, and Antonio Tarver in the rematch told him, "You're not going to," he said when they went to the referee at the beginning of the fight, he said, the referee said, "You guys have any, here's your instructions, blah 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 blah. Any questions?" And Antonio Tarver famously said to Roy Jones, "Yeah, you have any? You gonna have any excuses after this one, Roy?" And then proceeded to knock Roy Jones out. Fell stiff as a statue. LeBron James was 5 feet away from me, all iced out in white, and the crowd. What you feel there, you cannot. This is what I always say too, Noah, with fighting. It's not every fight. Every fight is not worth watching. Every fight is not worth your time. Every fight is not interesting. There are snoozers. There are boring fights. It's 15% of the fights that keep you addicted for a long time.
Yeah.
It's those special fights. It's those special moments. It's those jaw droppers. It's those things that make Joe Rogan say, "Unbelievable, unbelievable," his favorite word in the English language. And that is what I'm saying. Like for Joe Rogan, with the rarefied air that he's operating in now, with the big deal they just did with Spotify, it's like, hey, bro, like get some butts in the stands, for a guy like that to really, I would imagine, to really enjoy it, get 15,000 people in there. And a lot of times in the fight business, because remember, I always say my favorite moments when I worked for UFC, as much as I love watching the fights, my favorite moments were backstage, behind the scenes, in the fighters' locker rooms and dressing rooms before the fight, and feeling the energy, feeling the fear, feeling all that cascade of emotions, and the fight before the fight, like before the walkouts, like, oh my gosh. And especially when a fight like what we just saw last night with the kid Sean O'Malley fighting Marlon Vera, Cheeto Vera, you and I had discussed. I mean, there's a lot of anticipation around that fight because Sean O'Malley, Dana and a lot of other people from the rooftops are telling us this kid's the next great thing. He's got the it factor. He's special. And you and I were talking, we've seen this story before. I mean, usually it seems that more often than not, that when a fighter is hyped up like this, there's only one way to go and down. Unless your name is John Jones or Anderson Silva or, Demetrius Johnson in his prime, or Khabib Nurmagomedov, there are very few when the hype gets to that level that quick. I mean, this kid really, look, Sean O'Malley is fun to watch. He throws some pretty punches. He's dynamic. He likes to knock people out. He's colorful. He kind of looks like the boy next door, kind of, so it looks like a kind of the kid you grew up with skateboarding, and he's a cool kid. But bro, the hype was way out. You know, you and I, the hype was just way overboard. Like kind of like Sage Northcutt and even, you know, Paige Van Zant and just on, you know, and even Ronda Rousey. I mean, we got ahead of ourselves. I said we got ahead as trailblazing and pioneering as Ronda Rousey was. We were ahead of ourselves in anointing her. Like people were talking about her like she was unbeatable and invincible. She was amazing, but she was never unbeatable. She never was invincible. She was way too one-dimensional. People were talking about her striking and saying, oh, now she strikes. She's got pro boxer hands now, and her hands are so, you know, it's like, no, as somebody who's watched boxing for a long time, like she's punching better than she did. She's punching with more power, but she got a long ways to go to be like a, you know, really good striker, high grade. No, come on. So in any event, you know, you and I were on Tornado Watch yesterday. I'm like, dude, I got a feeling.
Yeah.
I had this feeling before. I got a feeling this guy Chito Vera is gonna bust the hype bubble. And I thought he'd do it quick. And what's interesting though, so it's interesting how fights get handicapped. You know, you look at the odds because this is what could trick the public on that fight. Going into it, Chito Vera, so Sean O'Malley is 12-0, and all you see on him, he's got, I think, 8 knockouts, 1 or 2 submissions, and all you see, if all you know about Sean O'Malley is all the superlatives everybody says about him and all the knockout reels you see, and that's all you have in your mind. You're thinking, I'm talking about casual fan who sees this is thinking, wow, the second coming of Conor McGregor, right? A lighter version. That's people were thinking. He's even got the chest tattoo, right? He's even got the chest tattoo there. So, wow, if you don't know any better, second coming of Conor McGregor, he's got the death touch. And so then you're looking at Chito Vera and you're seeing, hey, you look at his record. I think he's 15-6, something like that. I think he's 15 wins, 6 losses, something like 16-5 or 15-6. Okay. So you're looking at Chito Vera, and automatically you see this discrepancy. 12-0, right? 12-0, O'Malley. 15-6, Chito Vera. Could be 16-5. I think it's 15-6. So you're seeing that. And you're seeing the highlight reels. You're like, wow, this guy is being sent to the slaughterhouse, right? Chito Vera's got no chance. But when you take a closer look, this is what I did. And this is how I added up the calculus in my head and said, wow, this is a spot where I think that this kid's a great candidate to pull this upset. I think we're probably going to see an upset. And the reason that did it is I looked at his record and I said, okay, he's 15-6, but he had
Jordan's with us now.
Yeah. What's up, Jordan? So he's 15-6. Chito Vera was 15-6.
Yeah, you're good.
He had
I'm all black.
He had won 5 in a row. Okay. He'd won 5 in a row. And then he fought a Korean guy who trains out of Team Alpha Male, I believe. And he beats the Korean guy. Everybody who sees the fight, who knows anything about fighting, says that Chito Vera won that fight. And it should have been unanimous. Guess what the judges do to him? The judges rob him. Blatant, you know, nothing new about it. The judges robbed Chito Vera. So Chito Vera, so to the regular public, you're thinking Chito Vera had won 5 in a row. He's a finisher, but he lost his last fight, right? But if you watch the fight, you're like, oh no, he didn't lose that fight. He won the fight. So Chito Vera,
I do remember seeing that.
Yes. So Chito Vera is coming into the fight having won 6 in a row rather than lost 1, which people think, right? So Chito Vera had actually won 6 in a row. He finished 5 of them. He fought the better competition over Vera, and he's never been finished. So when you look at the matchup, you're thinking, well, this kid O'Malley knocks people out, but Vera doesn't get knocked out. Vera is durable. He's got the chin, kind of like a Diaz brother. So I'm thinking, all right, I don't think O'Malley's going to be able to knock him out. He's a finisher himself, this kid Vera, right? He's got the better ground game. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And the icing on the cake for me was the stare down. And when O'Malley he dyed his hair in the colors of the Ecuadorian flag. Now, if you know anything about fighting, I'm just saying this, and people are going to say it's crazy, whatever. But there are everybody says, you know, you can't motivate your opponent anymore. Like, you know what? I can talk crap to my opponents because they're going to train hard anyway, right? And I would say that you can do things to your opponent to make your opponent dig even deeper in the training camp than they would. Most people. You can say things. You can insult their kids. You could do things. Ali in one of his fights who was it? Was it with Sonny Liston or whatever? What's my name? Punished the guy even worse, right? It made it worse on him. So the notion that you can do things, there are lines you don't cross. And when you do, you give even extra motivation to a guy who's already hungry, who's already a finisher, who's already durable, who's already a tough matchup for you. Now you want to wear Ecuadorian flags on your head. I was like, oh my God, this Cheeto guy is going to really be on fire. Then the other thing, final thing, Cheeto Vera being robbed in that last fight. And he talked about this on Ariel Helwani's show. He said, the judges got it wrong. Ariel said the judges got it wrong. Anybody who watched that fight and knows anything about fighting know that Vera got robbed. Vera was so pissed, and you could see him pissed. And he was like, look, not only does that affect what I'm trying to do to win a title, but I got half the money. I got half the money I was going to get. And you guys know now, I mean, you're a fighter. You got to stash away money. You don't know. You got to stash away money for a rainy day. You get hurt, whatever. So when you don't get half your check, maybe the UFC made good on that. I don't know. But as of that time when he was on there, they didn't. So I was thinking, man, this guy is being disrespected. He's being counted out. He got robbed his last fight. Dude, let me tell you what, if you're a real man and you want something and you're like that, and the judges are robbing you and you're not getting half your paycheck and everybody's telling you how O'Malley's going to crush you and O'Malley's wearing Ecuadorian flags, bro. However, I knew this. However good Cheeto Vera was before when he won 6 in a row, he's going to be even better, a lot better, because he's pissed. And he looked to me like a guy that when he's pissed is going to bring a lot more. And that's what happened. Jordan, what were your thoughts?
Let me ask you this, Frank. Do you think that fight would have played out if Sean had not tripped on his foot and injured his foot?
I didn't see that, but I did see him writhing in pain about that. But I mean, we're never going to know. Maybe they'll do a rematch. I think Cheeto Vera is going to be a tough matchup for him. Cheeto Vera gets hit a lot. Now, Cheeto Vera is very hittable. I think when the matchmakers made the fight, that they thought that this is a good matchup for O'Malley. But at the same time, I think that they thought, this is just me, I'm conjecturing. I think they maybe thought, if O'Malley lost to him, this guy can be built to the Spanish community at least. He's billable. This guy is a finisher, Cheeto Vera. He's colorful. He's marketable, especially to the Hispanic fight fans out there. I didn't see. What's your opinion on that? I don't know. I think the guy would be a handful for O'Malley. Anyway, was O'Malley cleaning his clock before the foot?
O'Malley was not cleaning his clock before. It happened very early on in the fight, though. But and I have to speak very lightly because Cheeto is one of my training partners, and I've trained with Cheeto before. Cheeto, like me and Cheeto's came to 10th Planet Las Vegas. Casey used to coach Cheeto. So Cheeto used to be one of my training partners. I've trained with him for like 2 weeks or something like that. I did not expect Cheeto to win this fight, and I like Cheeto. I just think style-wise, I think that O'Malley had a better chance of winning that fight if he did not injure his foot. In my personal opinion, I feel like O'Malley kind of almost beat himself, man. He tripped on his foot, and you could see it on his face right away. He had whether it was an actual injury or not, whether he actually had something torn in his leg, he reacted like it was an actual injury. You know what I mean? So that's going to be the next speculation because he got his.
Well, let's see the news on that injury, right? You're
exactly.
right, Jordan.
Yeah,
let's see the news on that injury.
He got injured. I don't know if you've been following Sean, but I've been following Sean super close to his career. He got injured when he was fighting a guy named Sukumanta. I don't know if you guys remember that. His last name was Sukumanta.
Yeah, his knee. I remember his knee, and he's laying on his back when Rogan interviewed him.
He hurt his knee. He hurt his leg, and he was saying that it was fractured. It was broken. And then I'm pretty sure, you guys got to fact check me, but I'm like 95% sure. I just have a bad memory. That's why I can't say 100%. But I'm like 95% sure that his foot was not didn't have like a break or like an actual really, really bad injury. You know what I mean? So a bunch of people were like, oh man, like you were acting like you were seriously hurt, dude, and it wasn't even like a real injury, you know? Like it was a quick recovery time. It wasn't as bad of an injury as he was saying it was. And so yeah, we're gonna have to see how bad of this ankle sprain it was. If he just rolled his ankle and it was just a normal little ankle sprain, then he should have been able to keep fighting. Fighters fight through torn ACLs and PCLs and all sorts of crazy predicaments. That guy almost beat John Jones with the torn ACL, PCL, LCL, all of that stuff. Whoever that, I forgot.
AJ Argusarm just fought with the tore his ACL in Bellator. He lost the fight, but he fought
that
a
was
lot
hilarious.
of that fight. Javier Vasquez fought with a torn ACL in the fight. Miguel
Exactly.
Torres fought with a torn ACL, finished the fight. Heather Jo Clark has fought with a torn ACL. There's been.
So we're gonna have to see his injury and see how bad he was actually injured, and then go from there. But whatever happened to him in his head, it hurt him. It sent a bunch of pain receptors to his head, whether it was a real injury or not. You could see it on his face. He was hurting. So, yeah.
Gosh, guys, you know, I'm hearing all this, and lately I've had my head tucked into non-UFC, non-jiu-jitsu, non-fighting, non-MMA stuff. So I'm hearing all this news, and I'm like, wow, I've really been out of it lately. You know, I'm teaching myself, you know, how to do some data science. So this is pretty cool to hear all this, and that's really cool that you trained with him. Was it in the last year or two you trained with Chito, Jordan?
2 years ago, I'd say. 2 years ago.
All right. Yeah, I think that it's what you were talking about, Frank, with the insulting behavior of Sugar Sean. You know, I mean, obviously Chito's not going to go in there and just give up. You know, oh, I'm mad and I'm suddenly better now just because I'm mad. I don't know if he fights like that, but it's obviously that was probably a marketing train. What I have been doing, I'm gonna twist this a little bit in honor of my Fight Island shirt. With my family, we've been watching a lot of Survivor. CBS show Survivor, and so my head has been in that space where those kind of competitions and those tribal competitions, and it's me seeing jiu-jitsu and watching Survivor has been kind of fun to because of the cunning behavior that goes on, and then you start thinking about I start seeing that, and I start thinking about like in fight camps, all the nonsense that goes on in fight camps leading up to these fights. A lot of the is there any like spying going on? Is there any misinformation that's being put out there? Was that and then how the promotions spin events outside of the octagon, and how they play up things, kind of like Don King. That I was on a little story. I was on vacation in Cancun once, and I don't remember who the fighters were, but there was a brawl in the hotel lobby, and I walked downstairs, and it was Don King in the flesh, and I could have swore it was like a very controversial fighter of that day, Riddick Bowe. But anyways, this is my first time to ever see something like that, a spectacle of that. And I wonder how much the UFC is becoming with, are they starting to mimic a little bit of the promoters of boxing? Are they taking on any of those tactics? And how much Dana's influence is, where he's a founder. He's been with the promotion for so long. What would a UFC look like without a Dana White one day? I want to throw out there because in my business training we always look at succession planning, and one of the big risks, if I were sitting back and I was an investor in the UFC, I would be concerned with, now I know that the UFC here in Las Vegas has over 300 employees, so the UFC is not just solely Dana White. However, he's a strong, he is the brand. He makes the organization. So I want to say, just like we got to contemplate Joe Rogan leaving the announcers booth of the UFC at some point, increasingly. How would the UFC look without Dana White? For any number of reasons. Any number of reasons. That's something to contemplate, because eventually, people retire or life events occur that takes them out of that. So I'm going to just throw a twist out there, real time, with you guys. What do you think what would happen to the UFC? How would they step up with a strong, with a succession plan? Do you know anything about this from your insights, Frank? Or Jordan, you have any ideas?
I know that when the UFC sold, when they sold to Endeavor and other investors, that one of the, I believe I'm correct on that, I believe that one of the conditions was Dana White has to stay on as president. He can't.
Okay, it's a key man. Yeah, that's a key man clause. But let's just say he did not. Let's just say he suffers from some disease.
Right. So what I'm saying, I'm heading to answer your question. But so first thing I'm saying is, they obviously are aware of that he is, as you say, a key figure, and that he's a big part of the brand. I think what's interesting right now is everything that's going on in the world, with the world being flipped on its head with COVID-19 and all of the, everything going on around that the UFC is clearly leaning on Dana White a lot more now. I mean, they used to lean on in different cycles of their business. They've leaned heavier on Dana, and then they haven't, and then they've always used him a lot. He's always been a key figure, but at different times they've leaned on him even more. They're leaning on him a lot. Even if you watch his breakdowns before the fight, and he has the whiteboard and he goes there and he does a good job, and he's like, this fight here could be fight of the night. Like, he's doing it with more enthusiasm than I've ever seen him do. And I think it's because he knows, like, he realizes, and I think they realize, he has to be a salesman. He has to sell fights even more now, because the money is down. The live gate is down. There's a lot more challenges. Some of the big names are thinking, it doesn't make sense for me right now to fight, because the money's not where, the UFC is not making as much money. And so they've got to have, they had a really good card last night, by the way, and they've done some really good cards. They've had some really good fights in 2020, and nobody's complaining about that. They've had really good fights. Their brand is strong. I love the UFC potential over the next 5-10 years. I love it. I think that these kind of conditions, I think the UFC is adapting and will continue to adapt. And I think that in the long game, I think they're going to come out better than the vast majority of sports league. That's another conversation. So I'm bullish on UFC now and long term. I think they're adapting well. But as a brand, the reality is we're not seeing. If COVID had never happened, we probably would have seen even bigger name fights by now this year. We probably, Conor might have fought another time. He might have even fought it two more times this year. But my point is, it seems to my eye that they're leaning on Dana White more. Dana is everywhere. He's ubiquitous now. What's life going to look like without him? If I was an investor, I mean, I want Dana White around. I mean, he is that brand. Like, when you think of the brand, and I say this, like the Fertitta brothers, it doesn't happen without their investment. It doesn't happen without the fighters bleeding and the fighters stepping up and the fighters training and fighting when there wasn't spilling their blood, when there wasn't a lot of money to be made, when there was a lot of uncertainty for the fighters, right? So you've got the Fertitta brothers as visionaries taking a risk, losing money. You've got the fighters spilling their blood. You've got the fans who people thought were crazy, those diehard fans who helped put on the map. But, dude, Dana White is, I mean, whether it's unfair or not, if you just think of this brand, right, as much as there have been some awesome fighters and fighters we love and fighters we respect, if you just think of the face of this brand really over its 18-year period, I mean, you're probably gonna say Dana White, whether people like him or not.
Absolutely.
You're gonna say Dana White. Dana White is the face of this, and he is inimitable. He's not replaceable. Life can go on. Okay, this is one more scenario.
I got something to say. About all this, though.
Yeah, this is the one thing.
Yeah.
This is the thing that concerns me about the UFC. Okay, I love the UFC. This is the thing that concerns me longer term. Right now, the UFC is a U.S.-owned company. If the original investors, right? So I don't know what the valuation is. You're a guy. I would like to ask you, Noah. I mean, we can ask you this. You can answer it later in the broadcast. Maybe you don't know, but your best guess is to a valuation. I'm going to assume the original deal was for $4 billion when they sold. I was told later that when the Fertittas checked out all their money, the valuation had went to $5 billion. So it's probably, I think, even amid all this, I think it's more than a $5 billion brand because it has the ESPN partnership, which probably boosted it anyway. The question is, at what point do the investors turn around and flip this thing and say, we doubled our money or whatever, or we made $3 billion or whatever, and then who become the bidders? Foreign entities. Who become the bidders? That could change the whole dynamic of this whole thing. If you get a foreign investor and who says, okay, I want to do it my way, and I don't want as many of these Americans around or something.
Yeah. What if the Sheikh of Dubai, steps up? He loves jiu-jitsu with Enzo. But my point,
he was a 10%. He was a 10% investor on the original sale.
Sure.
He probably has a piece now. Probably has a piece now. Probably.
So I'm just going to throw out there, while it looks, this is like one of those things where Jordan, you weren't here earlier. I was complaining about my customer service experience with my shirt, my UFC store purchase, with this Fight Island. But I had been ruminating a bit about, this is like the time when when you see a situation like this, a company, and I'm just thinking, I'm just going to be, what I'm trying to be here is, it's just a little critical thinking, a little bit of just like looking at it outside of a fan perspective, but as a fan, because I would hate for the brand to be damaged. But you're looking at it and, they're a great promotion. They don't stack their cards with only one person. They've learned that lesson of like, oh, such and such might get hurt in training. They might have COVID, and so that whole fight card will collapse. They've learned to not do that. All right. But as a company, they're not doing that. They're not doing unto themselves as they produce their fight cards. And that's my example I'm showing by, that's another example I'm showing of like how, with their, as you do one thing, you do all things. They're only doing one thing really well. And that's putting on a great show. But managing the company itself, I would be concerned if I were an investor and, how they do other parts of their business, like succession planning.
Let me ask you this. So,
yeah.
The UFC and boxing and WWE have been the kings of pay-per-view, right? Hardly anybody else has really been able to make their money in pay-per-view space. The exception, the outliers is, UFC, professional boxing, and WWE, right? So they're
for pay-per-view.
Yeah, and maybe there's something out there like porn or something that does pay-per-view too, right? But for modern sports, they're the titans of that. And their business model, a lot of the UFC's core model before was a pay-per-view model. Now that's changed some. They're still a pay-per-view company, but that has changed some with the onset of the ESPN deal, because now cards that might have been a pay-per-view are put on ESPN. Quite a few of those fights are free. Some of that's, ESPN premium package, whatever. But now when you look at that model, imagine this. Imagine if you're in the pay-per-view business, you're a partner with, say, DirecTV, right? And so DirecTV's got all the apparatus you need, and they can flip that switch. And guess what? You do all the work, you take all the risk, you risk all the money, and I get half. I get half. That's DirecTV's got such a big platform that they can say, hey, bro, we set this up. We have the distribution. We have the apparatus. If you want a pay-per-view, you got to come through us. And the split, okay, it could be a little different, but it's roughly the last I knew, roughly a 50% split. Now, here's the curveball, and I'm sure people at UFC have been working on this for years. They've never found the end around, right? They've tried UFC Fight Pass. The end around is, hey, if we are the UFC and we say, listen, we're looking at our budget sheet, we're saying, we're worth, let's just say we're worth $6 billion. Our valuation is we're worth $6 billion, so we're worth more than we were before, okay? But how do we make ourselves more valuable, more profitable? Well, what if you got rid of, I'm being hypothetical here. What if you said, what if you change your DirecTV split from 50% to 35%, right? You'd need leverage to do that. What if you did a complete and said, because of the onset of technology or some other way, or you had all your fans went over to UFC, Fight Pass or whatever, and now you don't even need the middleman, right? What I'm saying is, if they're ever able to solve that problem, their revenue sheet goes significantly up. Like if they're able to ever find an end around to the big pay-per-view companies, right? So that's one way for them to make a lot more money.
Well, then let me bring up, what they did with signing that agreement with Disney. Match that to the deal that Joe Rogan signed with Spotify, because the stock price of Spotify went up considerably on the news of that deal with Joe Rogan. So I mean, they went up. In contrast to what the negotiated contract amount is with Joe Rogan, the stock appreciated even more. There was they had a bump in the price greater than $100 million. So because he's bringing to them a dedicated fan base of a few million viewers a week, and instantly I went on to Spotify. I added Spotify to my phone. So that makes sense. Now these marketing agreements, like you're saying, these platforms, those agreements, they look at numbers. It is like an actuarial analysis of, within these factors, this is how much, expected revenue growth you're looking at with subscription and paying. And so a lot of the valuation models, the way that works is what is my net present value today of funds I'm going to expect to receive in the future based upon a bunch of estimates. All right. So it's like the lifetime earning value of Jordan from his fights. What's his, if I say, what's his expected earnings value? And let's say today, this year, very weak on promotion, so nothing. It's going to be all negative cash flow. And then next year, he's going to make $25,000 on winnings, and the following year, 75, and then hopefully year 3, he's making $300K and up. So you put in these assumptions into these models, and that's kind of you back that back down to today. What does that look like today? It's a future stream of cash flows. But just to answer your question from earlier,
there is a very intelligent aspect of the ESPN deal. Gives them more than whatever they got for it, $1 billion plus, whatever they got for that deal. The ESPN deal helps them more because the ESPN deal doubles as an advertising deal, right? So not only are you getting the cash from ESPN, but you're also getting to advertise your product for whatever, the next 6, 7, however many years it is. You're getting to advertise yourself on the preeminent platform out there and be in front of new eyeballs, penetrate the mainstream audience even more, legitimize your product. So it's almost like a paid advertisement as well. It's like the ESPN's paying you, but also advertising you. So it just would seem that based on that, not only do you get the cash, but in 5 years after being on ESPN, you're reaching a whole new base. You get a whole new level of legitimacy. So
Yeah.
when you start going to evaluate, that alone probably helps you, 5 years down the road.
So could it be that maybe they're grooming the public? I'm going to throw out this. They're grooming us for where Dana transitioned to, he's not really running the business per se, and they have a Disney executive step in. I'm just throwing out what ifs. Could they be? Because if they make him so visible to us like that, they're grooming him for him to be there. Where he's got so much of that visibility to where they're deepening the bench of the executives of the company, and those executives are gaining power internally because Dana's spending more time marketing.
This is my own opinion, and I could be wrong. It's only my opinion, and I haven't seen Dana in a number of years. But I think Dana White is gone the moment it's not fun, and the moment he's being told a lot, or attempted to be told a lot of what to do, of what can't say, tone it down. That's the thing. That's the double-edged sword of getting bigger, and that's the double-edged sword, right? You get bigger, and as you get bigger, you become more corporate, right? And you become more tighter, and you become more like the NFL, and your commissioner.
Well, that's the model. That's the model I see.
Like the NBA commercial. Yeah. So the thing is,
that's the model I see, Frank. I see the UFC going the way of, where they start to legitimize, and let me use another word than legitimize, to normalize themselves more in accordance with how the other three-letter sports teams operate.
Let me suggest one thing, and this is a fascinating phenomenon that I'm about to mention, and it's like, because Dana is relative to every other commissioner out there, right? Every other commissioner, every other promoter, Dana is the most colorful, he's the most controversial, he's the most blunt, he's the most, he uses the most expletives. He's probably, he's got a lot of people that love him, and he's made some enemies, right? He's made his share of enemies. He's got a lot of people who say bad things at him or mad, whatever. So the interesting thing about Dana, and Joe Rogan falls in this category, and I've seen celebrities, there are some people, and I don't want to use the word untouchable, but there are some people who the public just says, well, bro, he gets a pass. And it's not because they're rich. It's not because it's almost because people sort of expect that from him. In other words, if Dana was a politician, he couldn't get away with some of the things he said. If he was selling Chef Boyardee or cars, he couldn't get away with what he says. But because he's a fight promoter, you can get away. People cut you more slack, and you can get. Joe Rogan gets away with things that would get most people. And I love Joe Rogan, right? But Joe's able to be blunt, and some comedians are able to be blunt at a level that will get most people fired tomorrow from their jobs, right? Like you just can't say those things. And Dana White has said things like that throughout his career. He's been blunt. He's been, forthright. Some people would say controversial. Joe Rogan has tackled topics and said things in front of microphones where he's just telling it like it is. He's speaking his truth. He's being blunt. And I think it's a beautiful thing when people are blunt and they're candid, right? But it gets a lot of people in trouble. 99% of people and celebrities, if they were to say the same things, would get themselves in hot water and have to issue an apology through their attorney. We don't see Dana White. If you attack Dana White on his social media, he comes after you. Imagine Roger Goodell coming after you and calling you a dork and calling you whatever, calling you a loser.
But I've been listening, since always, Frank. You're broadening my horizons and bringing in NFL references, which I tuned out NFL for a long time now. So I picked up I picked up an audio book that is, I just pulled it up, is 21 hours and 19 minutes. And the name of it, the title of the book is Belichick. And I am 7 hours into it already. And so, it's just, I'm throwing out here, this conversation about succession planning with the UFC. Could we ever see Joe Rogan running the UFC?
That'd be dope.
in place of Dana White.
I'm gonna say something, and this is crazy because
I just
you right here. The best. Listen, there's no way to replace Dana White, but if you did replace him, Renzo Gracie, your guy, your head of the academy, Renzo Gracie is the best potential replace. Now, again, there is no replacing Dana White.
Well,
but
yeah, this is just a different look.
If you were going to, a colorful guy, like, again, I'm talking about for my
Renzo.
money. I'm not speaking about Walt Disney decisions. I'm saying for my money.
Yeah.
Colorful. Now,
that would be fun to have Renzo at the UFC.
But Noah, you saw this. You saw the story recently where, some negative stuff had been written about Renzo and things that he said.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is the thing, man. I don't know how anybody can be a leader anywhere anymore because everybody has said something that they put their foot in their mouth and has some opinion that half the country doesn't agree with. And we're getting in this ticky-tacky thing in society where you're supposed to be a choir boy or a saint, or you can't have a job. It's insane. We're getting into this insane territory where
look at our president, my friend.
Yeah, you got to be as plain as water and oatmeal. That's as plain as you got to be. In fact, I do need to raise this issue with you guys, just on a professional matter, on the podcast. There may be a point in the near term, just because of some of my employment options I'm looking at, that I'm going to have to bug out of social media, because I post stuff. Political stuff on my personal Twitter account, and I may have to reconsider, some of that stuff, just because of, I'll just say I've been looking at jobs with the federal government, and you can't really say certain things about the federal. You can't criticize certain parts about the federal government or politicians if you're going to work for them. So I'll just say that much. Just to forewarn you guys that should things go in that direction, I may have to curtail some of my social media bonanza. But anyways, I sorry to take up so much time about this Dana White thought process. But, if we want to, things are going well. And I learned in banking, whenever things are going well, that's the best time. Let me tell you this. When you're sitting down, you're eating steak, that's when you need to start thinking about eating beans and rice. When things are going well, you need to step back and go, all right, let's prepare for a hurricane. Let's prepare for an earthquake. Let's prepare for a pandemic. That's, when things are going well for you. And I believe for the UFC, things are going well for them. What was that?
It's all right. I just accidentally dropped something.
Things are going well. Whenever things are, when you have sunshine, that's a good time to step back and go, all right, what can go wrong? Let's play red team. Let's see how that we can break this thing. And for me, I see a risk there with the UFC, the beloved UFC, of succession planning. We don't have another figurehead quite like, and I kind of see, as Joe Rogan's starting to slowly step back and back and back, he's stepping away from the UFC. He's stepping away from that core, that core of the beginning of what was UFC. People are stepping away. People are slowly stepping. It's drifting naturally. It's naturally happening. But that's what I'm saying. That's when, we should be talking about this kind of stuff. What would happen? How would Bellator respond? I know nothing about Bellator other than my jiu-jitsu coach Neiman and Hobson Filio fight under that promotion. Would Bellator score a coup by bringing over Joe Rogan? Or something wacky.
I don't think that.
I'm just throwing out crazy ideas.
I don't think that would. I mean, the thing is, like you and I were talking about with Rogan, you get to a space where you know, like I said, at the core of Joe Rogan, what I see is a philosopher and a truth seeker. I think he's just a true truth seeker.
Yeah.
And I think he wants to get in front of the microphone and speak truth and go down rabbit holes and say things that people are afraid to say. That's the comedians are like that too. They want to find a way to talk about things that are taboo or that, you know, or mythology, or they want to punch holes in things. He's that guy. And so to be able to be that guy to the fullest and best, right? I don't think Joe's content. I think Joe wants to continue to put on a better show, be a better interviewer, bring in better guests, go deeper. And what do you do when you're an ambassador, let's say for a major brand like UFC, and you're sitting there having these blunt interviews, 3 hour long, you're drinking a beer, you're whatever, they're smoking pot, whatever it is they're doing. And then you say some things that ruffle feathers in the corporate community. And it's like, then you may feel like you're like, how do you reconcile that, right? How do you reconcile your podcast with the other demands and the corporate culture? And that's very tricky. Most people cannot navigate that. So I think of that as sort of in the background, not to mention all the travel. And nobody talks about this, but if you're going to fights, as much as all of us love fights, the fight season, it's not even like NFL or NHL or NBA. The fight season is 12 months out of the calendar year, right? It's not 6 months like hockey, or, it's not NFL where there's a core season that's 5 months or whatever, but, 5.5 months. I mean, UFC pretty much is almost a fight every week, it seems like. So, you've been doing this as long as Joe Rogan has, and you've been loving it as long as I have. You still love it. It's still incredible, but there are other things in life too. He can sit in his basement and reach 2 million, 3 million people from his basement, get up and shower and make whatever his elk and his broccoli or whatever he's eating. I mean, and not have to go to airports and this and that. And so, and say whatever he wants pretty much. And so for me, he has a great relationship with Dana White, Joe Rogan does. But again, there's corporate interest now, and you just wonder, like, I don't know, but you just wonder how many times has it been the case where somebody has maybe said something to him, hey, Joe, would you? I don't know. But I would imagine that those factors there, like you're in front of your microphone and think, this is my show. This is our 3 hours. And we should be able to say authentically and honestly whatever we need to say to bring information out. But that information can ruffle feathers in corporate communities, which are much more stiff, which are much more traditional and conventional, and which want everybody they want everybody's dollar, right? They want everybody as a customer. And so that to me is the great reconciliation. And I think that even has to happen with Dana, and it's kind of a tightrope. And you just wonder, how long does a personality, a super honest, blunt personality like Joe Rogan or Dana White, how long do you want to walk, kind of, be around that tightrope and navigate?
Especially in in the cancel culture that we are in, and we're going to, while I'm on the what ifs, that Biden-Harris ticket goes all the way to the White House. And so now we have a political environment where we have, good old Joe, Uncle Joe in the White House and his executive team running the show. Whereas, the UFC would not have been able to do what it has done during this epoch of the pandemic without the president's, a little of the president's influence. Because White and Trump are close. He held the first of those fights in Florida, in Jacksonville. For a reason. They were minimal.
That's another example of Dana White. Dana White being Dana White. People see him and they're just like, well, that's Dana White. Whatever he does, like, well, that's just Dana White. But anybody else, it'd be like, you're a terrible person. Get out of here. You should be fired. You should never work again. Issue an apology through your attorney. And this is an example where, and I don't mean this I'm actually saying this in a positive way, where he's become such a cult of personality and so authentic, I guess, with who he is, that people just are like, yeah, well, that's just him being him, and it's okay because he's a fight promoter and he's this and he's this. But you're a, you're a lawyer, or you're a this, or you're that, or you're a regular athlete, and so you are not allowed to say anything that's remotely controversial, right? So it's just interesting how that's another example where Dana can give. He's now twice now went to the Republican National Convention. I'm sorry, yeah. He's at least twice publicly spoken on behalf of Donald Trump and said, Donald Trump did us a solid when we were struggling. I'm loyal to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a great man. He said that. You would think if Goodell did that, bro, there would be revolution. Like, Goodell would be fired within a week. I mean, he'd be gone. Any of these other commissioners, you could not publicly come out and do that. Dana White, and again, I'm saying that, meaning I'm not saying that as a criticism, not far from a criticism. I'm saying that as in because I actually, the cancel culture thing is not, I'm not into that. You know that I'm not into all the political correctness stuff. I believe that I believe that there's a lot of value in us talking through things and people being able to be candid and working through things and making progress and people disagreeing and tolerance. I'm a big fan of that. So I'm actually a big fan of people being able to be more of who they are and us working together, and a huge fan of tolerance. But I'm just saying that Dana is in a stratosphere where people like him and they accept that, hey, that's Dana White being Dana White, and let him be Dana White. It makes the UFC show more interesting. Kind of like Vince McMahon in the WWE. I mean, people just look at it as a different niche. It's almost like while you were saying something earlier, I thought of this. I thought of you were talking about if you got a job with the federal government and toning down your social media. And I thought, in some ways, sports is this alternative reality for people, right? It's an alternative reality in that, I mean, the athletes, the fighters, right? They can say things, they can be controversial. Dana White can say things, Joe Rogan can say things. But in any other ecosystem, you get yourself fired and hot water, caught into the fishbowl. Hey, tone it down. HR would want to talk to you. So it's almost like that's part of the appeal for the public is you have some of these personalities, and especially fighters are like this, where fighters are like, hey, a lot of them aren't working some other jobs. So they're saying, hey, I can say whatever I want to say as long as Dana White and the UFC are okay with it, then I'm okay. But if you were to say those things and you were to have a regular 9-to-5 job and you were to say them, or you were to put them on your social media the way that some of the fighters talk, you'd be fired. But in a way, that's part of the appeal of it, is that it's a place you can go where people, sometimes they talk over the top, but people talk real, like I say, real talk.
It's an escapism.
Yeah, it's an escapism, but it's also real talk. Some of it's escapism when it's over the top, like Conor, but then a lot of the fighters, you listen to them, like, wow, that's real talk, as opposed to the generic safe language that a lot of people have to use on their social media channels or whatever.
What you got, Jordan?
Yeah, let me touch base on that, because
Please.
It's real talk to a degree. To a degree, Frank. I think it is real talk, especially opposed to like real life. But I think if there was no fan base and there was no microphones and there wasn't like a huge backlash, if they were to say something controversial, the fighters would be saying even more crazy controversial things. You know what I mean? Like, as crazy as comments Conor McGregor has said, I think that if there wasn't such a political correctness in the world, he would be saying even more crazy things, in my opinion. I think he would be saying things that would be just infuriating people to a crazy degree. Like, there would be much more, and people may or may not agree with this, but there's always going to be these comments everywhere. And people, if there was these comments, they would get kicked out of the UFC. You know what I mean? There's very, very little homophobic comments nowadays. There's very, very little racist comments nowadays. There's very, very little comments like this. I feel like if it was true trash talk, and these guys were just pure raw emotions, no cameras, no pushback on like a fear about getting fired of the UFC, because guys get fired from the UFC all the time. Dana White just fired some guy for having like a supposed like Nazi lineage, and he hadn't had any ties to it for like years and years and years, and he's like, I dropped that. That's not me as a person anymore, but the UFC still let him go. So I think there's still a major fear in the fighters of watching their mouths and watching what they say and not offending people. As still they're still offending people. They're still saying controversial things, but I think they're still definitely watching what they say a lot and still watching their mouths and watching their words and watching what comes out of their mouths. Their words that are coming out of their mouths are not necessarily what's in their head, I think.
But Jordan, if somebody is going to say, like, so let's take some of the examples you're talking, homophobic and, whatever, Nazism. I know the guy's maybe it was a distant past or whatever, but if something represents something that's really hateful, really mean, vitriolic, right? I mean, how could you want that to be associated with your brand? You have to understand anytime you enter into an agreement with an employer, they're going to have some expectation of, you can't, hateful things, mean things that are really derogatory, and then under the umbrella of their brand, they're going to have some rule. We can't all just be a total free, exactly. Whatever we want to say. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Then I would amend what I said to realer talk. I guess realer talk relative to,
yes, that's what I'm saying. More real talk opposed to real life. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, if you have what they call screw you money, right? And Joe Rogan is kind of in that, you and I were talking about this yesterday, Noah, where, it does seem like when you have a lot of money like that and you're eloquent, he's a point where he can say a lot of things that, 99 point whatever percent can't say if they want to continue to build and make a living. Yeah, but so
that's kind of what a stand-up comedian's life is all about as well, because a stand-up comedian, a lot of the comedy, if you listen to a lot of what Joe Rogan says and what stand-up comedians talk about their stand-up comedy, it is a mass hypnosis where you are transported into someone else's thought process, and you're brought into a situation where you look at things with that freedom of speech perspective to say certain things and to call out situations in life that are that for whatever reason our brains interpret as funny. Unfortunately, a lot of times we get judged on what we find funny and humorous, but a lot of it is just, it's our natural, that's just how the brain works. The brain will, I'll give you an example. Have you guys seen Joe Rogan's stand-up special, any of his stand-up specials on Netflix?
I have not.
No?
I have.
There's one where he did in San Francisco, the Orpheum, where he was picking on the Kardashians and how they, his bit was about how Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner and the influence of the Kardashians on that. And Joe is a physical bit. He does a physical bit where he gets up on top of his bar stool on stage, and he mimics like a drag. And I don't know what was that creature? It's like some kind of Lord of the Rings kind of creature, and it's just our natural sense. It's just a natural thing with ourselves where we have to laugh at it, because we suspend. I think what happens is we suspend our critical thinking and our social justice warrior thought process in a way, and look at things from another perspective.
Yeah, and I would say this.
It lures you in.
I know that you didn't intend it as this, but I just for people who might watch this or see this, I've met Joe Rogan. I've conversed with Joe Rogan, and I would say my sense, and I know that you're not saying this, but just to be clear, the guy is not, he's the furthest thing from a homophobe. I don't watch his podcast regularly.
Or transphobe. He's not transphobic either.
In
No,
fact,
this is.
In fact, I've heard many stories where he, and I don't know what he does on his podcast, but where he actually rides people that are, he'll get on you if you are a homophobe, he'll ride you on that and
Absolutely
challenge you on that.
He'll be the first person to protect. He will. Yeah. But in the profession of I'm only talking about the process. I'm not passing judgment. I'm not passing judgment here.
I know you're not, but
I'm describing
a lot of people
a physiological process of how humor works in people and how stand-up comedians interact with their audiences to cause that. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not trying to throw shade.
Confused. It's very easy for people to misunderstand. But by the way, while we still have you, we're winding down here. You and I were talking about
already. Oh wow!
Right, Rogan is moving to Austin, and we were talking about the Spotify deal, whatever, 100 million plus, 140 million, whatever it was, and you were talking about the reasons it makes sense to move to California, one of them being no state tax in Texas. So
move to Texas from California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give us your perspective. You're a guy who spends a lot of time around money and finances and
man, I'm just gonna bounce. I'm just gonna like throw that back on you and say, even though I saw a clip or something where Joe Rogan realized, and Joe Rogan realized something, and I started to think about it, like, man, whoever his tax accountant is, the tax accountant just talked themselves out of a job because they did such a good job of explaining to Joe how much state income taxes he would pay with the Spotify deal that the light went on. And so he's like, you know what? You're right. I don't need you anymore. I'm going to move to Texas. So I just pay federal income tax only. And because state income tax, if you add all that in, and if you add in property taxes and all the other extra taxes, if you look at it, you're looking at a 50% tax rate, blended tax rate for those kind of guys at that upper echelon.
In California.
In California, yeah. I'm not a tax accountant, but at that level, you just got to assume that they are paying every cent. Every other penny that you earn is going to the people who Joe has a major disagreement with. But anyways, yeah. So that tax accountant talked himself out of a client because he convinced Joe to move to Austin, which is a great move. It makes sense. When I started hearing about Joe going to Onnit, when he started Onnit, and seeing how when he created the MMA podcast series and started doing that. The moment he did that, I'm thinking that's his way out. That's how he's going to that's how he's unburdening himself from the UFC. At some point, he's working his way to freedom, his own version of what he wants. He's lifestyle designing. He's lifestyle designing to get him to the place he wants to be. Unfortunately, in Texas, what maybe it's not brought the full impact to him is that in Texas, although Texas does not have a state income tax, they still have fantastic school districts. Those school districts have football stadiums that rival junior college and some small college football stadiums. Though all that costs something, and that's in Texas. Each school district has its own police force. Each school district has its own police force, funded by those people in that school district. And in Texas, the property taxes are high. Property taxes are high in Texas because you don't have there is a state sales tax. So the state has to raise money somehow. So they raise money from estate sales tax. They raise money from property taxes, and that's that's the hidden thing. So where you go live will impact you. I know from my own experience, I was shocked. And so although the income taxes, he's going to take a break there, state income tax, the property taxes, he needs to be careful how he spends that money. I hope his
Jordan, where do you think he'll train at 10th Planet down there in Austin? Who's down there?
There's some guys down there. I'm blanking on names right now. I think that's Curtis Hembroff's gym. I think that's the Onnit Academy, isn't it?
What he's putting his podcast studio in the Onnit Academy. That's been figured out. I went on to Reddit, and a former employee of Onnit.
Austin is. I'm not sure.
What?
I gotta look up where 10th Planet Austin is. In my head, I don't know. I don't know that much about 10th Planet Austin. I thought it might be at the Onnit Academy, but I might be wrong on that. But I'm pretty sure it's ran by this guy named Curtis Hembroff.
So, yeah, I mean, he's stacking himself into Austin pretty deep. Austin's got a great tech scene. I've been applying for jobs out there in Austin.
It's a cool city. I like Austin. I've been down there. I actually got to do 3 weeks of jiu-jitsu seminars down there in 2013, and I got the worst allergies though. Those juniper trees down there, man. I got the worst allergies in late February, early March, bro. It was, Jordan, you might relate to this. So I'm down there. My old buddy Donald Park I got to be down there 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be in Austin, cool town, do these seminars. But then I got those allergies, and bro, these allergies were so bad. I was bedridden. It wasn't like just, allergies. It was like I couldn't. So allergies can attack like your neurotransmissions, like your cells and your nerves, and like shut you down, right? Like you don't want to do anything. You don't want to get up out of the chair. So I was like, it was like everything I had, literally everything I had to be like, get up, go to practice, teach for 3 hours, roll with people too. Because I felt like for some reason I thought I can't not roll with them. Bro, it was an act of Herculean effort to go to practice, to teach, to have enthusiasm, and then roll with people too. And I don't know how, that's probably one of the best jobs I've ever done in my life. But it was one of those things where it was like, dude, you got paid, you need the money, it's a great opportunity. You can't just turn around and go back to Vegas. So that was something I remember about Austin. You probably know that, like Jordan, those days where, you just don't want to go because something's going on, or you're sick, or you're injured, or whatever, and you're just like, you gotta go. I mean, that was duty, that was discipline. My body did not want to go. That was me. My inner David Goggins was like, no.
Yeah. In Texas, down there in Austin, I grew up in Houston, and the humidity is okay. There's two things that I'm waiting to see how Rogan responds to that, because Texas has two things that California doesn't: humidity and bugs. So, he used to always throw a lot of shade on, like, all the West Coast, we kept going. We didn't get stuck in the middle of the country. And, it's funny how now, here he is going to Texas. And I'm like, he doesn't know how hot Central Texas is with humidity and with the dang mosquitoes buzzing around everywhere, bugs in the house. Oh, but that'll trip you up. And I want to talk about trips. Can we talk about trips for 5 to 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Trips.
Kind of trips
Jordan,
we talking about here?
Trips on the mat. Trips on the mat. Not no psychedelic trips. I'm talking about trips on the mat. Okay. I've been talking to Frank, and I'm like, my head and arm choke's coming along, but I got to get the guy down on the ground. And Frank said, you need a bear hug. I'm like, all right, but I want, I am amazed with some judo trips, just the foot action, and I really want.
Yes.
I want to have some trips in my arsenal, and so Frank's going to hook me up with some details. But Frank, did you want to talk about about trips?
Yeah. So just to build upon what you and I were saying yesterday. So one of the things that, and I'm sure Jordan, probably agrees too. So first of all, foot sweeps are pretty rare. You see them more in judo, but even in MMA, they're relatively rare, right? Everybody practices them. Hardly anybody hits them in a live tournament.
I was gonna say I don't feel like they're very practiced. I don't know, especially in MMA circuits.
Well, no, I'm saying by the time you're a black belt, you've drilled some foot sweeps that you never ever hit, right? You might have hit them on your kid, right? If you're playing with a 5-year-old kid and you hit it on the kid or something, but very few living live human beings have actually hit a live foot sweep in an actual tournament or an actual fight, right? There's a beautiful one I saw the other day where a police officer does it, taking down a guy, and it's beautiful. But so here's the point. They're relatively rare, but when they're done, they're beautiful to watch, right? Lyoto Machida had some beautiful ones. And what I was saying to you, Noah, is one thing I love about the idea of foot sweeps is that they're very high reward, and I wouldn't even say low risk, because there's almost no risk. I mean, the only risk would be if the other guy or girl was better at foot sweeps than you, or better at judo or something, right? Then there's really is a very, very low risk. That's one thing I love about it. If you miss the foot sweep, 99 out of 100, nothing happens. You just reset and you start again, right? So I love that about it. I also love that it attacks the whole body, right? You've got this upper body action going on, and then you've got the guy. So the guy, you're going after his foot, and so you're challenging his balance. So now the guy literally has to train from head to toe, which is beautiful because you're using the whole body and you're creating more of a guessing game. And so what we were talking about, as I was talking about, I was at the park yesterday in the morning, and I did like 2.5 hours. And one of the things I did was some foot sweep drills by myself, shadowing. And one of the things that's important for a foot sweep is you need this dual action. You need upper body action, right? You need upper body torque, right? To manipulate the guy's upper body or girl's upper body. And then at the same time, you need to get down that foot sweep, almost like a soccer kick, right? You need to get the timing of it down. So you really, if you're just drilling that at a park, Noah, and you were drilling kind of that torque where I'm turning him one way and then I'm kicking the foot, and you're now at the same time, your brain is getting used to juggling that, because that throws a lot of people off. Part of the reason a foot sweep is hard is the timing has to be on point, right? And most people's timing is not really good. The other reason a foot sweep is hard is because you got to do all this stuff upper body, and then your foot has to do this kick, and most people aren't proficient at kicking. And then even when they kick, most people in that kicking sweep motion have a very weak kick. They don't have the groin muscles. They don't have the strength there, right? Then you need a little accuracy, because your foot needs to act almost like a hand and cup the other person's foot. And one of the tricks, as we were saying yesterday, is you need to, if you're going to be good at foot sweeps, you need to be good at forcing your opponent to step. So you choose the moment when they're going to step. Okay. So I'm turning him, I'm pushing him, I'm turning him, and I'm creating an opportunity where I know his foot, I'm forcing him to have to lift his foot ever so slightly off the ground. He can be just this low. He lifts his foot just a little. And before that foot hits, my foot comes in and beats him. I beat him to the spot. And so that's one of the things, that you're creating a little bit of air. It could be a half inch, could be an inch. And you're timing it. You're forcing him to take that step. He or she takes the step. And as they do, before that foot hits the ground, boom, you get that good turn there. And you get that foot, that your foot becomes one with there. And you sweep it like a soccer kick, boom. And that's why I love the move. I've actually done the move probably a couple hundred times. I've never done it live, right? Except to like my little, like maybe when I was training with a student, when I was teaching kids class or something, right? Doing it on, for some reason, I'm able to do it on like 6-7-year-old kids. But yeah, that's basically. Jordan, did you want to add anything on that?
I was gonna say, Noah, do you mean foot sweep, or do you mean like outside trip, like a sotogari?
No, I was just talking about the standard foot sweep. But I actually,
I know you were. I know you were, Frank. You were, Frank, but I was asking Noah.
Oh.
Well, I was kind of categorizing both, including both in the conversation.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the more of the wrestler. I'm trying to think, because one thing I do like to do, and I was telling Noah this, I have hit this, where you do a foot sweep to a single leg, so you don't actually knock the guy down, right? So you get they'll turn. You're able to get the foot. Yeah, you're able to pick the leg up enough not to throw him down to the mat, but you're able to get enough of the leg where you can then secure a single leg and then go from there. So I have done that a couple times, which is something I also recommend.
Yeah.
But no, I love it. I love it. I think it's again, the thing that hurts a lot of people is the timing of it. You have to really drill the timing. You have to force your opponent to have to take a step, and then you have to get good at. You can have great foot sweeps, right? Let's say, hey, you're good at getting your opponent to take the step. You're good at getting your foot there, right? His foot's in the air. You're good at getting the foot and sweeping, but your upper body torque is lousy. Well, you're not going to take him down then. You've got to have violent, strong upper body torque. Whoom. And then if you get that, if you time the foot, right, you really sweep that foot and you get a good turn and torque, man, it's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful techniques to watch. It's like what everybody's like, whoa.
Just the concept of it is very appealing to me because it's doing half the work. It's doing half the work for you because your opponent is, instead of them deploying their own objectives, their own offense, they're spending so much mental energy. Time is like, oh my, everything I do right now, every time I pick my foot up, every time I try to place it, I have to defend. I'm going to have to defend what this guy might surprise me with, because that's a threat.
It is a little.
It's doing a lot of work for me. It's doing a lot of work for me.
No, it's a little bit like a head kick in this. I say this about a head kick in MMA. If you wanted to knock your opponent out with a head kick in MMA, you wouldn't come out firing head kicks. You don't want him to be like, you're firing head kicks and he's automatically
he blocks it.
If my opponent came out firing head kicks, I would assume that he wants to set his hands up or he wants to set up a body, a strong body kick or something like that. So if you really wanted to land the head kick, you would throw kicks, at the body, at the legs, you'd throw punches, and you would force your opponent maybe to move a certain direction. You would time him, and then boom, you'd set him up for a head kick. The foot sweep can be like that. I've seen people that mess with your feet early, and they mess with your feet early, but really what they want to do is maybe judo throw you, right? So they're messing with your feet to get your attention on that foot sweep. They'll come
it's a Trojan horse,
sweep, and then boom, they'll go into a throw. That's very common. We see that a lot. I know you see that a lot, Jordan, where somebody messes with your feet, but they're not going to be able to foot sweep you, but they're using that as a decoy to set you up to something else. So if you truly want the foot sweep itself, I would recommend going with other entries and then boom, get the foot sweep. If you're just playing around with the foot sweep, that's fine. Hey, get him to think about his feet, and then you shoot a single leg or you shoot a throw, a judo throw, because it will set him up. It certainly has an effect when you start messing with my feet. But if you really want the foot sweep, I would recommend showing them a different look early on, and then.
So boom. What would you suggest so that I could do the mental priming of my opponent? Where they're not thinking about the feet. What are a couple of techniques you would suggest?
You got to start getting some upper body pushing and get some attention. You got to be careful though, because make sure you don't go pushing too much against a judo guy. Let's say you got a judoka who's better than you. You don't want to be trying to bully push him that's not good. Like if you go against a really good judo guy and you're pushing, right? Mm-hmm. But if he wasn't a judoka and I thought, well, I'm better there, I might do a lot of pushing. I might do some pushing and some bullying. But if I was dealing with a good judoka, I would push. I'd be like, I might do more lateral stuff. I might play around with some takedowns, the threat of some takedowns, on the legs, and then, but yeah, that part of it's not easy, man. It's not easy to say, but if you want the foot primarily, you don't show the foot. Like, and that's a general principle for a lot of things. If you want some big move like that, whether it be a high kick, a leg kick, you could throw 50 leg kicks and land them in a fight. You don't have to disguise that, right? But if you have a killer left hook that you want to land, you don't come out throwing the left hook all the time because he's going to be on high alert, especially if you're throwing it hard. Like, oh my God, his brain's like, don't let that left hook land. If you start throwing something that's beautiful and it's hard, your opponent's not stupid. Your opponent's going to be like, I'm taking the left hook. I'm taking the high kick. I'm taking the trip away from him. The problem for them is that when they're so worried about that, like you just said, it opens up other things. Now you've got to have the game that can do those other things, because now you know, hey, I got his attention here. Like, let's say, even keep it simple in wrestling. In wrestling, most people like to shoot to one side more than others, right? Most people. Some people are they're ambidextrous. They can shoot on either leg. But most people prefer one leg or the other. Well, what if Jordan changes the stance and he's leading with the leg I don't like? Just that alone, right? Just that alone. Or guy likes to fight conventional. Now he's fighting a southpaw.
Yeah.
Bro, just that alone will trick a lot of people. They're like, damn, hey, Jordan, we stopped hiding the leg I want to shoot on. Well, you got to have an answer to that. You got to know that if you got a beautiful single leg and now Jordan's not giving me the leg I want, he's leading with the other leg, you're going to be good. You got to have an answer for that stance, or else you're never going to land that primary move you love.
Cool.
Opponents, same thing with a foot sweep.
Cool. Well, guys, it's been a great hour and a half or more. We've covered a lot of material here. Last thoughts? Final thoughts? I'll give it over to you guys. I'm done.
Give it to Jordan.
Jordan, you got the word.
Give it to me.
You got the word. Close us down.
Good podcast today, guys. I'm still coming for Sean O'Malley. I'm coming for Chito Vera too. I'm coming for anybody in that division. I'm sorry I was late, guys. I'm going to be here next week for sure. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week. I had to get my training in, you know.
You got to train, man. You're the fighter.
It's good to see
As
you guys.
always.
I'm excited for next week, and I'm excited to see you guys soon, man. So have a good day, guys.
Happy Sunday, gentlemen. Miss you guys.
Happy
Bye,
Sunday,
guys.
Take care. Bye.